The Maker was locked in a dome for 2 years, and in Ultimate Endgame, he finally gets out. This is every hero in the Ultimate Universe throwing everything that they have at one man, and it almost isn't enough. This is the Ultimate Endgame full story. Now, this is a compilation of all the individual videos that we covered on the channel, put together into one big video just for you. And real quick, during the first couple of issues, I kept misspeaking and saying Dezzy instead of Dezhead. Big apologies in advance here. All right, let's get into it. So what we do is that we pick up on Earth 6160 out in the Eternal City of Olympia back in 1963, 3 months after the Maker's arrival here to this universe. And here we see him holding King Zurus as he starts off by saying, "So much for Eternal," as we see Eternal's bodies lying on the ground and up against walls as well. And he says, "No resurrection this time," which of course is very much paying homage here to Thanos in Infinity War. "Not for you. I defiled your sacred machine, reprogrammed her to serve me, and deleted the entire Eternals protocol from her memory. From now on, dead means dead. The venom works fast. Living abyss extracted from the unbeyond. Sounds silly when you say it out loud. These are your final moments, King Zurus. Take them in." So then King Zurus is like, why? Like, why are you doing this, man? To which the Maker is like, because this is the one. A world still malleable, brimming with potential. A reality as flexible as I am. Your race is by celestial design, antithetical to change. Conflict was inevitable. Today, I am embarking on a grand experiment, not so different from the one that created you. Perhaps you could appreciate that. So then King Zurus asks the question, "And if your experiment fails?" And the Maker says, "Then I will burn it all down and start again." So to explain what just happened here, just in case this is a little bit confusing. So King Zurus, like, who is he in the first place? So from the main 616 here, he's an Eternal, more specifically here, the Prime Eternal and son of Kronos. Now, he was first introduced here back in the Eternals issue number 5 back in the late 70s. So as it pertains here to the Ultimate Universe, the Maker is wiping out the Eternals because they represent built-in resistance to his plan to redesign Earth 6160 from the ground up, and killing King Zurus is him permanently removing that obstacle so that his grand experiment can run unchecked, which is not different from what he's done here with some of the other heroes. But what makes this a little bit different is that when he says that he's reprogrammed their sacred machine, he's taken the god level system that used to resurrect the Eternals and turned it into a reset tool for his own version of the world. So let's say that his experiment for this universe fails. He can now use that machine to reboot the whole reality and then start all over again. So what we do next here is that we jump to the present time out in December 2025 here, 30 minutes to the Maker's return. This is where we see Peter and his family here out in Staten Island in the Savage Land. Here we find out about more ultimate uprisings here based on what Iron Lad had done to essentially radicalize the world. We find out here that there have been uprisings in West Virginia. There's been another one here in Massachusetts. There's also as well been some in the city of Detroit, and how a large organized force of workers have overthrown and imprisoned the local police, occupied government facilities, and declared allegiance to the Ultimates. Now, this information here is being read by Jonah Jameson here and, of course, Uncle Ben, and they are a little bit skeptic here of this information, based on the photos and the videos that they believe could have been faked, and how they view that this phantom reporter is not an impartial source and they need to go ahead and confirm. But this is when Iron Lad steps in and is like, "I assure you it is true. I am there with them now. Detroit has officially joined the Ultimates." So JJJ is like, "Well, we'll quote you on that start, but also Uncle Ben, still go check your resource here just to make sure that this is true." But then Iron Lad here is back to business and he lets Peter know that it's time for them to go. Now, I'm going to interject here and shoot us a little bit of a reminder that this is all happening here after the conclusion of Ultimate Spider-Man, which we have not seen yet. The conclusion for that was supposed to be released here in this month, back on the 24th of December. But it was delayed here back to February of 2026. In fact, we will see 2 issues here of Ultimate Endgame before we see the conclusion here of Ultimate Spider-Man. So context might be a little bit off here when we're looking at Spider-Man himself in this story. So now jumping back to this here, Peter has already essentially said his goodbyes. Naturally here, his son Richard Parker is like, dude, I'm coming with you. To which Iron Lad's like, bro, you're just a child. And Richard's like, my guy, you're like 3 years older than me. And also, I have this suit. To which Iron Lad's like, yeah, dude, that was for you, Peter. This right here is unacceptable. So then he takes the suit off of Richard and then throws it back on to Peter. And the Pico suit and Peter are like, ah, man. But it's here where Iron Lad reminds him, he's like, my father built that Picotech suit just before he sacrificed himself for us. It was meant for Peter Parker, and he will need it in the fight ahead. And the Pico suit is still protested, to which Iron Lad's like, you will do what I tell you, or I'll roll you back to factory settings and choose a more helpful personality. Because just as a reminder, the Pico suit, yes, it does have Peter Parker's personality. So then here we see where Peter hugs his daughter May. And then he turns over to MJ. MJ's kind of pissed. She's like, a few weeks is all I wanted. A few weeks of peace, a few weeks together. After all we've been through, we deserve a few weeks. And she understands that Peter has to go. She's like, I know that you're number one on the list, whatever that means. You have a responsibility, but what about your responsibility to us? And then Tony's like, man, we gotta go. And we do have a plan, Miss Parker, a pretty good one. To which Peter says, hey, you hear that? The smartest people in the world are on my side. I'm going to be fine, guys. I'll be home soon. You hear me? I'll be home soon. Which just has all the signs, man, that they might kill off Ultimate Spider-Man, but I'm going to believe that this is a red herring for now. I've thought about this. I think this is a red herring, but let's move on. What we do next here is that we go over to Latveria, just outside of the city, about 10 minutes before the Maker returns. And it's here where we see these two meet up with Doom and then also America Chavez. So then Peter is asking about this plan, to which Tony mentions how he and Doom have spent relative years developing a way to take control of the city. Once the dome comes down, we'll turn the city itself against the Maker and its Children of Tomorrow. Now, as a quick reminder here, the Children of Tomorrow were originally introduced here in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610. They're a hyper-advanced post-human civilization here that the Maker created as his army. Back on Earth 1610, he used them to wipe out Asgard and depower Thor. And then we saw here successors of the Children of Tomorrow here as an instrument here to reshape this reality in Earth 6160. But when it comes to this plan here, Peter's asking the question, he's like, okay, but where are all the bad guys? And that's when they tell Peter, well, the members of the council who still live hide in underground bunkers in distant dimensions, as far away from ground zero as possible. To which Peter's like, well, if the Maker's own men don't think that they'll survive the city opening, shouldn't we find that to be concerning? Why aren't there more of us here as well? Where are the Ultimates? And that's when Tony lets him know, well, the Ultimates are everywhere. And following the message that he broadcast last month, the uprising has rapidly spread across the globe. New fronts open up every single day. I am currently in 23 places at once in various capacities, in shielded asynchronous orbit. I help She-Hulk coordinate a movement with over 3 million active members and growing. And it's here where one of those members mentioned that they're tracking a massive storm in the upper atmosphere over Kansas, while Tony continues on to mention that he's also in the East with Captain America and Hawkeye leading irregular forces against Captain Britain and his otherworld reinforced Imperial Army. He mentions how giants crush entire protest movements under their gargantuan heels, while Techno Merlins see our strategies in tea leaves and the entrails of goats before we even think them up. He also mentions how he's with Luke Cage, and how he and his Ultimate Avengers, an army of superpowered former prisoners, sweep through the South like a liberating fire. And here we see where Luke Cage says, all power to the people. As Tony continues to say, regular citizens flock to join from all over, each for their own reasons, but all with something or someone to avenge. And we get this shot here where we see one of these Ultimates that says, feel the pain you caused in life. And I got to assume that this is the penance stare here. So I'm like, is this Ultimate Ghost Rider? But then Tony continues on by saying, deflections are common among the enemy rank and file. 18 North American Union bases have been captured and converted to the cause. I am in Martha's Vineyard breaking the neck of a gamma-enhanced guard dog, and I am in Albuquerque tending to the wounded. I am in Detroit watching for retaliatory strikes, and I am in Galveston eliminating a hidden hand recruiting office. And as the countdown begins here at 5 seconds before the dome opens up, Tony continues to say, "We have forces in heaven, hell, and everywhere in between. The uprising is bigger than you can imagine. There is no one to spare. We will have enough." And it's here where Tony connects over to the ultimate as he says, "This is Ireland to all ultimates. We're about to cross the threshold. I don't know what comes next, but I know this isn't the end. Whatever happens, you are all heroes to me." But then as the dome opens up, they do not get what they expect, because then Tony's like, "I can't see anything." But then in the meantime, what starts to happen is that She-Hulk mentions that the storm that they were seeing, that is starting to now break the atmosphere. But then simultaneously, what also happens is that the dome goes back up. And as the dome goes back up, now Iron Lad, Spider-Man, America Chavez, and Doom are now trapped inside. And what that does is that cuts off Tony from everywhere else where he was. He's no longer fighting with Cap and Hawkeye. He's no longer here with the Ultimate Avengers, and he's no longer underground here with the civilians that were going up against these officers. And what that does is that takes the officers, or that allows the officers to be able to take advantage, and they start firing at the civilians, which is an ugly sight. And what we begin to see here is that storm that they thought was actually a storm was not a storm at all, because what we see here is the Hand and their carriers and their Hela fleet. And they start firing off here. As Nick Fury says, "You're mine now, blow him to hell." So now the Ultimates network is down. And then we get this little smirk that we see on the Wasp's face here, because after all, she is the informant here of the Hand. We see civilians dropping. We see debris falling from the sky. Meanwhile, when we jump back here to our 4 heroes on the inside of the dome, Doom begins to explain. He's like, the temporal dome, the Darwin bubble, must have been reactivated somehow. To which Tony says, well, the math's all different. What is with this 4th dimensional curve? And it grew in 3 dimensions. Its radius expanded to encompass us, or to capture anything that might have escaped in the millisecond the field was down. To which leaves America to ask the question, but why would the Maker do that? He's been trapped for thousands of years. Why would he slam the door shut on his own cell? To which Doom is like, yeah, he wouldn't do that. The only reason to do such a thing, which then gives Tony the idea, would be to buy the outside world more time. My father, this has to be him. He's alive. But then Doom's like, nah, fam, that's very unlikely. Howard Stark was a brilliant and resourceful man, but I doubt even he could survive thousands of years in here. So when we go a little bit further in, we see the city, and Tony can't quite believe that this is the right place, because he thought that they were going to be entering some kind of utopian city of tomorrow, but it doesn't quite look like that. So Doom mentioned, he's like, well, the air here is soiled, filmed with greasy particulate matter. To which Tony tells him, he's like, well, nobody remove your mask. We don't know what we'll be breathing in. To which Spider-Man starts freaking out. He's like, he points to America Chavez and he's like, she doesn't have a mask. But then America's like, well, I also don't have to breathe either. So as we move on, Tony wants to stick to the plan. And the plan that we see here is when Tony says to Doom, he's like, upload the payload and take control of the city before the Maker's forces find us. But for Doom, he's like, this city is a living thing. It's always evolving. This architecture is nothing like it was. But he's like, still, we got to go there, the central spire. And even though it's unrecognizable, he still believes that this is the center of the city's nervous system. But before they could fully make their move, here comes this blast that almost hits Tony Stark. But luckily, America Chavez was able to save him. And when they look up, who do they see? Well, the children of tomorrow. To which Spider-Man makes this very keen observation. He's like, they look pretty grown up to me. So then Doom, he starts firing off his guns, and Spider-Man's doing all he can just to get out of the way, while the Pico 2 is just like, bro, you gotta move faster or I'm gonna have to take over. Tony mentions that he did prepare a countermeasure for this, which he calls the antimatter machine gun, but when he fires it off, that crap does absolutely nothing. To which, of course, he's like, bro, that's impossible. Nothing that exists can resist this. While America Chavez here is taken on fire. Peter is then trapped in one of their claws. Tony's trying to activate the Immortus engine, but that thing is not working.
And it's here for the first time where Tony is like, dude, I don't know what to do. But then what happens next here is that this blast comes in and it hits one of the children of tomorrow. And then when we see up in the sky, we see a suit that looks like an Iron Man suit. And Tony's excited for a second here. He's like, Dad? But then the children of tomorrow, they vaporize that thing too. So now Tony's like, no! But then here comes in unexpected reinforcements. Now, one of these characters here is named Deathheed. And I had to look this up because I just was not familiar. Apparently, this is a Marvel UK character. I actually think I said the name wrong. I think it's Deathheed. And basically, Deathheed here is a robotic bounty hunter who calls himself a freelance peacekeeping agent rather than an assassin. So he comes in here with his friends and they start taking out these children of tomorrow, while the Ultimates are like, yo, I don't know what the heck is going on here. But then what's interesting here is as one of the children of tomorrow jams a tentacle here into Doom, it starts smelling. And for the first time, we hear him actually speak English as he struggles to say the whom, as in Doom. But then what happens here is that Deathheed comes in and then completely takes out this children of tomorrow. And then what Deathheed does there is that it takes Doom and says, all right, we gotta go because there's more children of tomorrow coming. And because the city is not so friendly for tourists, they now need to move like citizens and they gotta hurry and follow Deathheed's. As Deathheed continues to mention, the Deathlock has been activated. So now we know what this other thing is. So as Deathlock takes out the children of tomorrow, the rest of them, the group hops on up out of there, leave an explosion in the wake. So in the aftermath of that here, Deathheed explains, this one's designation is Deathheed 22, freelance freedom fighter for hire. And then the question is asked to America Chavez, you are this prisoner's bounty, speaking of Doom's prisoner bounty, to which America explains, no, we came here willingly. So then Deathheed says, the commander will answer your questions or devolve you to single-celled organisms before you can ask them. One can never be sure which. So Tony, once again, keeping that optimism, is like, is it my father? Like, it has to be. All of this is clearly derived from Stane/Stark Iron Man technology. So with Deathheed's like, this one knows nothing of Stark, Stanes, or Iron Men. This one serves on an entirely at-will basis. The commander, Immortus, Lord of Time. And I'm just like, wow, what a phenomenal way here to complete the Kang cycle. Because yes, Tony thinks that this is his father. I 100% do not. I think this right here is Tony, and you'll see why in a second. So here we see where Immortus is just tinkering with his head. And he just wants to know, like, hey, Deathseed, have you brought me some more corpse for me to, work on here? And when Tony's like, father, Immortus is like, do I know you? And Tony's like, it's me, your son. And Immortus is like, the son is the father to the man. I've had so many fathers, so many sons. You bear my mark, but I don't remember making you, any of you. Perhaps I haven't made you yet, or perhaps it was so long ago that I've forgotten. Guerrilla warfare in 4 dimensions is infinitely more complicated than 3. So then Doom chimes in, he's like, Stark Immortus, whatever you call yourself, we have come to end the Maker. We have brought weapons, viruses, and poisons we think can do the job. Can you help us find him? And then Immortus just starts laughing. He's like, I see I made you with a sense of humor. Delightful. It's not finding the Maker, my forgotten son. It's escaping him. And it's here where he says the word, the Maker is the city. And what we see here is the Maker's face looking weird and discombobulated as a heck. And I'm like, oh crap, the Maker is the city. Wow. So we open up back here in the city, and Immortus, who is actually Howard Stark, as we find out here, Tony's father, is giving them the rundown of what's been happening inside the dome for the last 2,000 years. But here's the thing. My man is not telling the story here in order. He's jumping all over the place. We see how 700 years in, Howard's talking about how he bravely sacrificed himself, setting off Soul's armor in the city center, destroying Research District 1 just days before they were about to break through with their chrono battering ram. That would have popped the Darwin bubble early. He's describing being consumed by a million undone suns and the screams of dying children being both terrible and inspiring. Then he jumps to 80 years in, where he faced the Maker a long time ago. Howard mentions feeling a snap of nostalgia just before feeling the snap of his neck, and then nothing at all. Then 444 years in, we see legions of living weapons fighting street by sentient street. Howard watched as the Maker's children slaughtered his own creations, these perfected forms of death and destruction. He mentions poor Dezzy, number 18, saying he was always his favorite. Then year 1310 or 1310 years in, Howard leads a raid that went wrong. Long after the Maker had given up all pretense of humanity, he describes the nauseating chemical taste of the Maker forcing himself down his throat and asks if you know the sound your lungs make when they explode. He says it's just puff, kind of pathetic. But Tony's kind of at his end point here. He's like, bro, this is not making any sense. Stop jumping around here and just start from the beginning. To which Howard is like, the beginning. The forever war defies traditional chronology and continuity. It rejects attempts to connect cause and effect. Its order is a high order. War in 4 dimensions. Now, real quick for you guys here, let me explain what this 4-dimension things mean, because it's been mentioned so many times here throughout the Ultimate series here. So let's talk about that, right? So in the Ultimate universe, we're talking about thinking beyond just the 3 spatial dimensions. So think length, width, and height, and including time here as now the 4th dimension. So Doom has been teaching people to think in 4 dimensions to escape the prison that they were born into. It's about understanding and manipulating time itself, not just space. That's why Howard is jumping around in his story. His mind is being warped by thinking in 4-dimensional space for so long that linear time doesn't really make sense to him anymore. This level of thinking literally drives you mad, because the human brains, we just weren't meant to, like, it just wasn't built this way. So then Tony goes back to this. He's like, okay, what exactly do you mean that the Maker is the city? So Howard finally gets into the important part, which is year 1610 years in. And yes, of course, that number is very significant, right? Because the Maker is originally from Earth 1610, the original Ultimate universe. So Howard watched helpless as the Maker absorbed the city mind. He describes it spreading like an oil spill, coating every atom, fruiting bodies burst, spreading microplastic Maker spores, silicone machinery that remodels minds into receivers, extensions of the Maker mind. So people are essentially breathing in the Maker and then becoming his appendage, or the appendage of the Maker, if you want to put it that way. Listen, their words, not mine, but essentially what that means is that the Maker can control them at that point. And in the aftermath of that, Spider-Man makes the point here where it's like, it's a good thing that they all kept their masks on, because ultimately as you breathe it in, then you become his. So then Tony asks a question. He's like, so was that you who extended the Darwin bubble? You did it to keep the Maker cloud contained, to which Howard is like, yes, containment. Yes, precisely. It's the only workable strategy, delaying the inevitable. So to make that clear, Howard was the one that closed the dome just to make sure that any of that oily smog, whatever that the Maker has, could not get out. But what we'll find out is that that didn't completely work, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then here's where it gets even more interesting, because America Chavez asks this question. She's like, this is not really much of a delay, is it? I mean, the way that the bubble works, only a few microseconds have passed outside since we've been in here. But then because of what Howard just did, that has now essentially reversed the field. So while they've only been inside for a few minutes, Spider-Man realizes, oh shoot, outside, it's been months for them. Which is when we quickly then pan over to outside of what's been going on out there, and it's not good. We got this phantom reporter that's coming in here that's dropping updates on social media about everything that's been happening. It's mentioned how it's been more than a month since Iron Lad, Doom, America, and Spider-Man were lost in the city. In addition, how there were 8 Ultimates who were lost in the destruction of the Triskelion, how people in Latveria, where the dome was, are evacuated into Hungary and Romania, fearing that the Maker will return, that the Ultimates are recommending maintaining 200+ kilometers distance from the city and Latveria. And then we see in Latveria some dude named Carl, and his friend is asking like, yo, what's the noise? And then we start to see Carl just like throw up all over someone. So essentially what this means is that some of those particles got out even in that brief time when that dome was open. And it's mentioned here that Anything that comes out of Latveria should be treated with suspicion, quarantined, and thoroughly examined. We then cut over to Heaven here, which is now being quarantined from outsiders, with all gates being guarded by Bruce Banner's forces. As we know, those are his immortal weapons. Then we see Danny Rand here with the young Shang-Chi, and because they've been preaching democracy and radical nonviolent resistance, but what we see here is that followers are literally lighting themselves on fire in protest against what has happened. Meanwhile, in the North American Union, we got Vision and the anti-war machine. It's mentioned how they destroyed most of the Han Hela fleet, which was covered here back in the Ultimate issue number 20, something that we covered here on the channel. And then what happens here is that we then cut over to see the Black Panther and Killmonger. Now, they're currently right now out in Brennanzana, the royal palace of Wakanda. And this scene right here is very interesting. So Killmonger comes to T'Challa and is like, there is a thing that must be done. He's like, King T'Challa, I am your sword. I have been waiting. Is it war? The boy's message, the maker, all this injustice, this deprivation, this rage, I have felt my entire life, all because of one man. Can it be so simple? But then T'Challa responds back and is like, no, of course not. Our problems are much older than the maker, as old as men itself. But if we are to solve them, if we are to free a continent, all peoples, the maker cannot be allowed to return. He would have this entire world in chains or no world at all. Now, it is mentioned here from the Phantom Reporter that the Black Panther did decline to join the Ultimates after facing heavy criticism here from hardliners after allying with outsiders, something that was discussed briefly here in Ultimate Black Panther issue number 24. But T'Challa goes over and continues to talk to Killmonger and is like, I did not name you my sword. I named you the sword of Wakanda. So be the sword, Eric Killmonger. Be our vengeance and kill our protector. Kill the maker. Now, for context here, after the war with the progenitors in Ultimate Black Panther, it seems as if though T'Challa is not fighting anymore here. Now, we weren't able to see the actual fight between Ultimate Black Panther and the progenitors, which is something that kind of irked me a little bit here. But what we can assume is that most likely the Black Panthers refused to jump into fights anymore due to him being concerned that because the progenitors' blood or the vibranium that the progenitors created is in his blood, he doesn't want to be corrupted if he goes into battle. But when we jump back here to the floor with Howard and Dezzy here, what Tony says to his dad is, there must be a way, to which Howard responds back and says, there isn't, I should know. My machine men couldn't kill him, despite endless numbers, destructive power, and lightning fast artificial intelligences. Then Howard starts listing off all of his failed attempts. He mentions here the Invincible Iron Army, and yes, of course, this is paying homage here to the classic Invincible Iron Man title. My man Howard created machine men in his own image, neural networks modeled on his perfect mind, but the big mistake is that for some reason they spend all day exchanging lewd messages in binary and hacking their own systems to simulate altered state, which just had me rolling, man, because these robots are basically getting high and sending each other thirst traps. And then he mentions the Deathlocks, how they couldn't kill the maker either. These were constructed from the corpse of dead children of tomorrow, purge of the maker's taint, death incarnate. But Dezzy mentions that there was some defect when it comes to their designs because they ended up spending most of their time composing bad science fiction short stories, fumbling awkwardly with big questions about life, death, and the future of Turgid Prose of the Dead. I might have been saying that wrong. Forgive me, y'all. So America Chavez is like, that's amazing. I would love to read some. This girl's hilarious, man. And then there's Deathseed 22 himself, who chimes in, and Howard calls it one of his finest designs, ruthless, unstoppable, and completely for sale. This dude's a clown, an entrepreneur to his nuclear core. America asks, how can this dude be a soldier of fortune if there's no economy? And Howard's like, I invented a digital currency for just this purpose. And he calls it Startbucks and how he can give her some if they have something to sell. And of course, they're only redeemable here in this gift shop that had to be shut down. But back to the main issue at hand here, because once again, the question is, are they still currently in the city? And that is when Howard explains, he's like, no, this is limbo, a place where nothing ever changes. So Tony's asking the question. He's like, the hell dimension that's ruled by Ilyana Rasputin? To which he's like, no, everything here is living on borrowed time. Limbo is composed of stolen seconds, a few from one century, a few from another. We are everywhere and nowhere at once. And that's when we see here the Immortus engine. And that's when Howard mentions, he's like, the maker. Mind is powerful, yes, but still is limited to 3 dimensions. The Lord of Time knows no such limits, and that is me. But then right as he says that, what we do see on the outside is that the children of tomorrow are trying to make their way in, because indeed they have found them. But they don't know that yet. They continue their conversation. What America Chavez wants to know, she's like, the maker, he's had thousands of years to fix himself. Why would he still be limited? And that's when Howard mentions, he's like, who can say? There are holes that can never be filled. Absences that are reflected and magnified in everything that you do or become. So then Tony shows Howard the primitive Immortus engine prototype that Howard had gave him here back in Ultimate Invasion issue number 4. And he's like, ever since I've been here, my Immortus engine hasn't been working. Can you help me? It's me, Dad, Tony. And Howard kind of just stares at him and is like, nah, I don't know you. And then Doom asks Dezzy the question. He's like, yo, is he always like this? To which Dezzy's like, thinking in 4 dimensions too long will drive you mad, which is something that we talked about a little bit earlier. He's like, your meat minds weren't meant for it. And then he also mentions, he's very drunk, tachyon wine, smell the misplaced minutes on his breath, which once again, they had to pay some sort of homage here to Tony Stark being an alcoholic, and also, of course, relating that to Howard Stark also being an alcoholic in some sort of which way too, right? But then he's like, listen to me, Tori, to which Tony's like, Tony. And he explains, he's like, I've died more times than can be counted trying to kill the maker for reasons I long ago forgot. I've given every second 100-second chances. The maker always wins. A temporary stalemate is the best we can hope for. Your smooth-minded meddling could upset the balance I've struck here. So then Peter's like, all right, man, I'm good. Like, we could just bounce. We could go back then. To which Howard is like, of course you cannot go back. There is no way for you to get out without risking releasing him. So then all of them are just like, yo, what do you mean? To which Howard is like, I gotta keep y'all here, and here you will be safe. But as soon as he says that, here comes in a perimeter breach. To which Howard's like, impossible. It can't be him. It can't be. Well, indeed it is. And that's when we see, like I said, the children of tomorrow and the maker speaking through them. As he says, I found you, Howard. I should have known. Hiding in a knot of stolen time. To which Howard's like, it's borrowed, not stolen. So when America's asking the question like, yo, how did he get here? Howard's like, well, you must have, which most likely means their presence is what led them to this place. So Dezzy's like, dude, my lord, the engine, speaking of the Immortus engine. And one of the children of tomorrow is right next to it as he says, 2,000 years, Howard, I've waited 2,000 years just for this. To which Howard's like, big deal, try 2 million. And he mentions the maker must not have the Immortus engine. The engine maintains the dome. If released, he will smear himself across the face of all. So then everyone ensues the fight. And as one of the children of tomorrow come in here on America Chavez, he says, I smell the outside of you and something else. Is that the future? Failure? And he mentions how she does not belong here. But then Spider-Man is also fighting under the children of tomorrow. And the Pico suit's kind of pissed off here because he's like, Spidey, you're blowing it. Let me. But then Spider-Man is like, yo, stop fighting me and then help me. And then just in that moment here, Spider-Man gets caught by the legs. And then another Children of Tomorrow says, hello, Doom. And then he looks in his eyes and says, how nice to see your face. And as the fight continues, Children of Tomorrow say, the machine is mine, first the dome, then everything. As one other says, this all unfolds with the inevitability of history. Now, Tony mentions this. He's like, my weapons only make them stronger, and I can't make my Immortus engine, like he can't get it to work. So Dezzy's like, yo, listen, victory is impossible. And then he mentions this one sells preservation circuits. So then America seems to get the upper hand here on one of the Children of Tomorrow. Spider-Man, listen, things ain't really going too well for him. Also now, it looks like the maker recognizes exactly who Spider-Man is, because remember, the first hero that the maker had gone to try to prevent him from becoming Spider-Man was Peter Parker. So the Pico suit is once again asking, yo, Peter, let me take over. To which Peter's like, no way, I'll get out of this on my own, which of course he won't. But then what Howard had done smartly here in this moment is that he transports the Immortus engine to somewhere because he's like, that's it, it's gone. And he's like, you'll find it eventually, but I've bought them more time. I'm a hero. They'll all remember whoever they are. So then it's here once again where Tony is trying to get his Immortus engine to work. But then what happens is something that we did not expect, because then Howard comes over and just like blasts him. And then he says to him, he's like, the rules are different here. The engine must be recalibrated to work with the novel space-time geometry. It took me a few years. In its current form, it would take the maker minutes. So then what he's trying to do here is ultimately stop, and it seems like kind of destroy Tony Stark. So Tony is screaming, stop, but he's not budging. And then Howard continues by saying, with an Immortus engine, the maker will destroy this reality and replace it with a new one. Everything I've built, everything I've done, none of it will matter. And Tony is still pleading. But then Howard is like, I'm sorry, Tommy. Man, that must have hurt in that moment, bro. I don't see the resemblance. And it's here where the Immortus engine inside of Tony actually starts working as he screams, Dad, don't. And then he blasts Howard with it. And what that immediately does here is that all the time that was borrowed, it basically removed it from Howard, because we see him immediately become a massively old man. And Tony's like, Dad, yo, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. But it's in this moment here where Howard seems to have remembered. He's like, I remember you, but it's not a pleasant thought, because the memory that he gets is Conqueror, Destroyer, going back here to once again Ultimate Invasion, where we saw, well, at least we as the readers believe that Tony had become King the Conqueror, right? And that is what he saw when he opened up that mask. So this all but confirms it here in this particular moment. So because of the situation, America comes out, she's like, yo, Tony, we gotta go now. Like, this is our chance. We got to get out. But Tony's like, yo, not without him. And as they step out here of that moment, of that portal, of that limbo that they were currently in, Tony's like, man, my dad. But then Spider-Man looks over and he sees what looks like a Children of Tomorrow. He's like, I think a stray robot zombie followed us out. And Dezzy here and Howard, they're still stuck on the inside. And it's here where the maker says to him, he's like, call it nostalgia. I've reconstructed my old personality for time's sake, here at the end of the beginning. Or perhaps speaking English just brings it out of me. I can keep you alive and in agony for all eternity, Howard. I'll torture you with your own stolen time. Give me the engine. But then Howard mentions again, is like, you don't listen. The engine's gone. This place isn't made of stolen time. It's made of borrowed time. And without the engine, it runs out. And it's here where we start to see that thing just evaporate. As the maker screams, no, I will have it, Howard. I will have it. As Howard says, listen, my son, before we evaporate here, as he's talking to Dezzy. And this dude is a clown, because Dezzy's like, yes, father. That seed 18 was always my favorite. And just like that, they were gone. But then what happens next here? On the outside now, they go back to being trapped in the city outside of that limbo state, right? And they're trying to call the Tony, but homeboy is devastated, like he cannot move. But then we hear this voice that says, because now, remember, they are exposed again. As the voice then says, welcome home, Doom. It's good to have you back. Your help finding Limbo was appreciated, but killing Immortus was just the beginning of our work together. Don't worry, I have no doubt you'll make your maker proud. So like, bro, Doom has been compromised this entire time. That stray child of tomorrow, right? Followed them out of Limbo. That wasn't random, in my opinion. Doom led the maker straight to Howard, in my personal opinion. Remember back in the Ultimate series here that the maker did something to Reed Richards' brain when he was transforming him into Doom. He literally broke and rebuilt Reed's mind. It looks like the maker also left himself probably a back door, and now he's controlling Doom remotely. That is wild to me. So where this kicks off here is a really grounded human scene. So what we see here is Mary Jane, who catches Richard Parker sneaking back into the house. Now, this is not the first time here. This is not the second time. This dude has been trying to get into the city to find Peter multiple times. And this time, homeboy ran into some velociraptors, which is the reason why this dude got 700 band-aids on his face right now. Now, he does mention this. He's like, I should be in the city. I should be with Dad. And then MJ tells him, she's like, there are other ways to fight, and how she spent 3 months verifying and summarizing thousands of pages of alternate documents for the public. Now, Ben and Jonah, they chime in. They're like, the paper that they're running is reaching millions of people. They tell Richard that you have a bigger impact here than anywhere out there. But Richard does ask this question. He's like, how the heck are y'all still online, man? With all the council's tech and resources, why hasn't hand come for them yet? And the response here is that they honestly really don't know. But in a second, they do indeed find out, because what we see here is Vision pop up on the screen. And he's like, it's me. I'm your guardian angel. Now, he doesn't say that. But he explains to them that he has quite an influence here over the internet. And basically what we get here from Deniz camp through Vision is what's been going on with the other heroes in the fight against the Maker's Council. So he lets us know that the Ultimates and their network are making moves on multiple fronts, that Shen-Chi and Danny Rand are fomenting a non-violent peasant uprising in heaven, dividing the Hulk's forces and keeping him distracted, that the Fantastic Force has been dismantling the Children of Light out west. Outside of the North American Union, the Council's grip is way tighter and progress is thus far slower. And then there's the activity that's going on here with our young mutants out in Japan. The Maystorm Squad, they're currently stirring up trouble for Emperor Sunfire. Vision says that they've been monitoring them and preparing to support their efforts. And it's nice that we actually get a little bit of a scene here from, seeing the mutants of the Ultimate Universe, or the X-Men of the Ultimate Universe. And they are currently looking for Hisako here, who is Armor. And as they're actually make their move out to Latveria, there's this fight that they get into where Killmonger actually shows up to help them. We also do see Ultimate Wolverine here with Lady Deathstrike, or I should say fighting Lady Deathstrike. And as we remember here from the very last issue, that the Black Panther had sent Killmonger out to do some fighting. So what we do next here is that we actually cut to the team that is inside the dome right now. We see America Chavez, a Spider-Man. We know, of course, Doom is there. We know that Doom, right, is compromised from the very last issue, but we'll get into that because that plays a part here throughout this entire issue. Now, Tony, after killing his father in the very last issue, like, he is distraught. Like, he is on the ground, on his knees, not doing anything. America Chavez is trying to get him out of it, and the Pico suit is like, yo, we're all going to die. Now, they're all fighting here against the Children of Tomorrow, which of course is being controlled by the Maker, and the Maker is seeing through them. And the Maker is taunting them. He's like, not much are you? I expected so much more. Already, I am beyond your comprehension. All of this is so small. You came here to fight, but how do you fight everything? The ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs. I am all around you. I am inside of you, which sounds weird, but I'm just gonna leave that alone. So as they charge in here at Tony, one of the things that his suits does is that it puts up this repulsor field and it auto engages. In the meantime here, Doom makes this realization. He's like, we understand that all of this is an extension of the Maker, which to Doom, he finds very satisfying here as he exacts his countermeasures. Then for a moment here, we see where Spider-Man is being clamped up, and that's when the Pico suit says, listen, bro, like, I could help you, if you just ask. And that is when Peter finally lets the Pico suit have some reign. He's like, I'm asking. This is me asking. And then, of course, the Pico suit transforms here into his Venom form. Now, one of the allies here that was able to escape with the team is one of Howard Stark's Deathlocks here. And he sends out a blast that absolutely obliterates the head of one of the Children of Tomorrow. So America Chavez, she gets intrigued. She's like, how are you hurting them? And of course, the Deathlock responds back in something that none of us understand. But fortunately for them, well, America Chavez, she did. And that's when she's like, okay, I'll try that. And what that does is that temporarily it blows up all the ones that were there, and then the team is able to go into this repulsor field that Tony had created. So now Peter, he does ask the question. He's like, what exactly did you do, America? To which America Chavez is like, just what Deathlock told me. Attack with a specific frequency of cosmic energy that they were vulnerable to. To which intrigues Doom because he's like, you understood her and how? To which America says, I don't know, I just listened. Now, once again here, the Deathlock says, rah, 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 or she says, rah, rah, rah. And when they turn around, all they see is another massive swarm here of children of tomorrow coming towards them. And this is when this fight begins to look even a little bit more impossible, because what one of them says here is, "So did I." Right? And of course, remember that, the Maker's talking through them. "I hear everything, even your thoughts. Right now, you're thinking, this is hopeless." And you're absolutely right. So with Doom learning the information that America Chavez just told him, Doom is trying to figure out, he's like, what exactly was the composition of that cosmic energy, America Chavez? To which America's like, it doesn't matter. The Maker adapts instantly and cannot be defeated the same way twice. This man is too OP. Now, there's this moment here where Peter tries to connect with Tony on an emotional father level here. And he says, look, what happened back there with your dad? He left you no choice. It wasn't your fault, Tony. Speaking as a father, I'm telling you this, it was his. But I have a family too, and I haven't been a great husband or father lately. I have to get back to them. I have to make it up to them. So snap out of it. Snap out of it. And it's here where they are dead to rights. It looks as if though they are about to be obliterated right here. But then something happens because time stands still and the team is so confused. To which Peter's like, yo, is this you, Tony? Like, are you doing this? And then we see the freaking voice that comes in that says, now that is a complicated question. And that is when we see Kang the Conqueror, ultimate Kang the Conqueror. Now, Kang mentions here, call it a temporal tourniquet. I tied off the flow of time around us to talk. But don't get comfortable, Ultimate. And at the same time, while he's saying this, what we see here is that the Maker is already recognizing the threat level and is also now deploying countermeasures. So Kang continues to speak. He's like, the Maker will find some way to slip through or around it, to evolve past it. He always does. Now, at the same time here as well, the Maker is also in Doom's ear, and he's like, first Howard, now him. All my enemies delivered to me. Good boy, Doom. Hold him here. To which Doom is like, all right, I'll do just that thing. So he says, who are you? To which Kang responds back and says, all of this is just how I remember it. Every detail. You don't have much time left, and there's still a lot to do. Here, let me clear the air. So then he snaps his fingers. And what happens here is that all the children of tomorrow, they essentially disappear. And then he continues on. He's like, I am the last king of everything, the ultimate victor. A few million years from now, they will give me the title of Kang, and it will stick. And then he pulls off his mask and is like, it is one of the universe's first words from the first spoken language. Roughly translated, it means all conqueror. But please, my friends, just call me Tony. And look, they look like they just seen a ghost. Because Doom's like, it can't be Tony. Spider-Man's like, everybody's got an evil double but me. Like, my guy, you really disappointed about that? Especially considering that the Pico suit considers himself to be, Peter's double, but I guess he's not evil, so I guess the point still stands. All right, let's move on. Because Tony Kang continues by saying, we've had this conversation an infinite number of times, but the look on your face never gets old, Doom. Now, America Chavez, she's not really for this. She's like, nah, like, you ain't Tony. That's Tony right there. You ain't Tony. You are a fake. And then she references here the current state that he's in, to which Tony Kang is like, he'll be fine. He just needs time to process. Trust me. Now, once again here, we see the Maker in Doom's head. He's like, or ears. He's like, with 2 Immortus engines, I could really start thinking big. There would be no limit to my expansion. Keep him talking, Doom. I'm on my way. So Doom does just that. He's like, why would we trust you? So Tony Kang continues. He's like, because you trust him, referencing the other Tony. And also, I'm just him with a few billion years under his belt. And then we look here at the Maker at the same time and what he's now become, because I kind of understood this here. It looks as if though he still does have some of that symbiote venom goo with him. So he's also transformed as well into something different now. So Spider-Man's asking the real questions. He's like, hold on, man, like billions of years and you look exactly the same. To which Tony Kang is like, I am eternally trapped in the moment just before my first death. I'll never grow old. To which Peter's like, you mean like Peter Pan? To which Tony Kang is like a god. So America asks a question. She's like, have you come back to help us kill the Maker? To which Tony Kang is like, no, I would like nothing more, but no, that isn't how it happens. So Doom is like, what do you mean by that? Now, simultaneously here, as we pan back to the Maker making his move, he says, temporal tourniquet, forever the sun. The father tried this on 4 occasions. So like I said, the Maker is making his move, but Kang continues to tell them, all of it, everything, the whole futile struggle, our great and total failure is your tragic, gruesome deaths. So Spider-Man is like, whoa, gruesome? What now? And then we see the Maker speak to Doom once again. Now, while he's distracted, disable him, but don't damage the engine. And while Kang continues to speak, he's like, all of this is history. Everything is happening just as it's supposed to. And it's in this moment here where the Maker has Doom shoot at Kang. And what he does though is that he hits Kang directly here in the chest, which is not according to what the Maker wanted. And as the Maker looks on here from the shadows, he's like, you failed again. Ah, well, one time machine will have to do. But what this does here is that this now forces time to start moving back to normal again. And they know here in this moment that they're gonna be dead in minutes. While at the same time, America Chavez is asking the question like, Doom, what the heck are you doing? Now he responds back here and says, our objective is to kill the Maker. Whoever that was, Kang or Tony, refused to help. Either he was an agent of the Maker sent to sow confusion, or he was a distraction. In either case, he is a danger to our purpose. And I'm just wondering how long before the team finds out that Doom is like the Maker's sleeper agent. But Spider-Man asks this question. He's like, how does us being dead help with that? And as Tony Kang disappears, he's like, just as it's supposed to. And when he fully disappears, what we see here is that we now see their Maker coming on in. And it's a scary sight because they say something. They're like, my God, are the buildings bending around it? To which Doom is like, no, reality is bending around it. And Peter expresses, he's like, you just shot the only edge we had here. To which Doom is like, I don't think so. Whatever else he was, I think Kang was right about Tony. He hasn't been in a coma, he's been calculating. And right on cue, we begin to see Tony's eyes light up. Now, as the Maker comes on in, what we do see here is that America Chavez, she blasts part of the Maker, but then all that happens here is that some of that symbiote goo that splats down on the ground. And then some of it actually gets onto Spider-Man. And that's important, and you'll see why here in a second. Now, their Tony, the one that they're used to, he gets up and he's like, sorry to scare you, everyone. I'm okay. Temporal mechanics was never my strong suit, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. And as they fly directly here towards the Maker says this, he's like, I made you. I made you all. All of this is my design. And that is in the moment here, or in that moment, I should say, the Pico suit begins to say, Peter, something is wrong. And what happens here is that the Pico suit, it comes off of Peter entirely. And as the suit comes off, the Maker recognizes Peter, because remember, after all, he was the first person that the Maker sought after to prevent him from becoming a hero. And he says this to him. He's like, you wonder why you were #1 on the list? You wonder about your special destiny? You wonder what it means? Then let me tell you, nothing. And what we see here is scary. Like, we actually have an ultimate carnage, And the Maker continues on. He's like, it means nothing. There was no significance to the order. You're not special. You were a box on a to-do list. You left your family for nothing, wasted your last years with them for nothing. And as he begins here to take Peter up, and then what we see here is that he takes those tendrils and then he drives them directly through Peter and kills him. Like, bro, didn't we call this? We knew this crap was gonna happen. We knew that it was too damn good to be true. Did we not? Yo, they actually killed Peter Parker, bro. I'm upset, y'all. Listen, we the people can't deal with something bad happening to Peter here in the Ultimate Universe. This was a perfect story with Ultimate Spider-Man. And then, damn it, you know what? I'm gonna digress here. I'll leave the red to later, because what happens here is that America Chavez is like Spider-Man, and Tony is like, you killed Spider-Man. And here, Carnage Maker is like, it was always leading to this. Parker, I think deep down you knew that. Oh, the carnage. Isn't it beautiful, man? And then after this, what we see, man, is that we see MJ. She's just out looking out a window. Richard comes down and is like, Mom, are you okay? And then MJ's like, of course, I was just getting some air. Like, she doesn't know yet, right, what happened, right? But Richard is like, it's 4 a.m. and I heard you crying. Why were you crying? And that's when the MJ's like, I'm actually not. But then she's like, I actually didn't even know that I was. I guess I was just lost in the stars. So which Richard's like, my guy, like Mom, like you underground. What stars are you talking about? And then what we get here is this sad letter that says, I won't read the whole thing, but this all just confirms that like Peter is really dead for real. It says, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, which makes you a widow, which is convenient if you want to run with the whole Spider-Man themed superhero thing. Guys, I'm not distraught because I'm still holding out some hope that they're gonna bring Peter Parker back, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not a fan of this, right? Like we don't need the heartstrings pulled this strong. We've already seen what's going on in 616 world with Spider-Man. We didn't need you to insinuate. We didn't need you to fit. Bro, listen, I'm gonna leave it there. So right off the rip, this issue is a little convoluted. There's a lot of threads that are running all at once. So we're gonna be breaking it down here front by front to make it all make sense. Additionally, one more thing to lock down here is that the Maker is operating in essentially 3 different places at once. There is himself as the city, this giant living tree. He's also controlling Carnage on the battlefield. And then he also has a direct line here into Doom's head. You're gonna see some of that dialogue here as well. So we open up right where we left off here in the very last issue, where yes, Spider-Man, Peter Parker is dead and Doom is distraught about the whole thing. Simultaneously, America Chavez is screaming at Tony. She's like, Peter Parker, bring him back, turn back time. But Tony's like, I can't do that. I haven't totally mastered the physics in here yet. Peter Parker is gone. And then through Doom's head, the Maker is like, if getting teammates killed is a science, then you are indeed a genius. Now you've got Doom just standing on the ground here, looking at Peter's body laying there. And the Maker just keeps on talking. He's like, my nightmares are your nightmares, Doom. Stop fighting yourself. It's embarrassing. But what else do you expect Doom to do? He's fighting through it, and he's trying to rally the team at the same time. He's telling them, we must make it to the city center. All of this is just a distraction. Now, meanwhile, right next to him, Carnage is in Deathlock's face as the Maker is speaking directly to her. So then America says, all right, well, if we got to make it to the center, then I'll be the one to get us there. And then she sets off this absolute boom, kaboom, and takes out a huge chunk here of the Children of Tomorrow. I also believe that she took out Carnage because we don't see him for the rest of this issue. Now, the concept here of Doom trying to hold the team together while fighting off Doom in his head is genuinely very interesting to me in this series so far, especially considering what happens next, because we see right there in the aftermath of this explosion what the Maker has his eyes on, but we will come back to that a little bit later on. Because what happens next here is that we cut to Boston, where we see Steve Rogers, and he's in the middle of this street fight here with Captain Britain's forces. We also see Hawkeye, we see Quicksilver. Now, the yellow text boxes here that we see on these pages, these are Vision, Jim Hammond, and he's running this private thought log here, narrating Cap's mental state in real time. And what he's seeing, it really isn't good, because Steve has been falling apart ever since Fatherlandville. And that's what happened back here in Ultimates issue number 22, something that we did cover on the channel. But what happened there is that Captain America was forced to kill, or he felt like he was forced to kill Bucky, who had become the Grand Skull. Now, Vision has known Steve here since 1941, so we can see that something is not right. So even mid-fight, Vision is trying to snap him out of it. He calls him out on his absences, which is allowed for Captain Britain to be able to reinforce his troops. And basically what that means for Vision is that Steve's troops are losing morale because of it. And Steve admits it here. He's like, I have let my emotions cloud my judgment. You deserve better than that. you all deserve better than that. And Vision is like, on the surface, it sounds good. But at the same time, he's clocking that it's a good 65% chance here that Steve is just telling him what he wants to hear. And that is when T'Challa patches in from Latveria. Because yes, there is another thread that we have to follow. Because in Latveria, Black Panther, Storm, alongside the Ultimate X-Men, are fighting the Maker's infected army outside of the dome. And T'Challa's report is this. He's like, these soldiers that they're currently fighting in Latveria, they aren't just soldiers. They've been taken over by the Maker's hive mind, and they do not stop. And this is where Storm adds in that they fight these soldiers. They fight until they're killed or their hearts give out from exhaustion. So what they've done is that they've set up this containment wall to keep these infected soldiers from trying to get inside of the Maker's dome. The Wakandan army has done their best here to quarantine the capital. However, outside of that, the infection is still spreading. So although they have additional reinforcements here because Doom's Fantastic Force that he's created, they're there. There's also an entire Wakandan army that is out there, the Dora Milaje. However, that is still not enough. So he makes this call. He tells Captain America that he has targeted Latveria with vibranium enhanced nuclear warheads to wipe out the infection completely. So Cap's like, you gotta be kidding me. That is crazy. To which T'Challa is like, I am king. It is not only my right, but my duty to protect my people. And should I deem it necessary, I will. So when we jump back to inside the dome, Tony is throwing everything that he has at the Maker. Tony even mentions that whatever he's made of will last millions of years, but not billions. So the Maker, once again, in Doom's head is saying to him, he's telling him that you should be me by now, Doom. The microplastic machines that entered through your wounds should have made you my echo. He thought that he had cut out all the fight out of Doom, referring back to what happened here in Ultimates issue number 4, where we saw how the Maker created Doom in the first place, but Doom is still fighting it off. So Doom, he turns to America Chavez and he asks her this question. Have you activated the distress beacon to the Guardians of the Galaxy here? We're talking about the Ultimate Guardians of the Galaxy. And America says, I have, however, the signal can't get through the dome. But this is where the Maker finishes what he's been building towards all issue. Because still in Doom's head, he says, you've been hiding something from me, a secret. Yes, I know, and I have allowed you your secret, because while you have been so focused on keeping it, I have had full access to the rest of your mind. So Doom's like, what? So now naturally, we don't even know what that secret is, right? Because why would they tell us? They'll make us sweat it out. But of course, this has been a normal thing here for Doom. He's held secrets about the Immortus engine here and using that to bring back the Ultimates. We also know that for a while that he was holding back, that he was experimenting on mice to bring back the power of the Fantastic Four. But he's already created his Fantastic Force team here, so that's not really a secret anymore. So I'm assuming that whatever this secret is probably going to be revealed here in the conclusion of Ultimate Endgame. But the Maker continues on because he needed something that was inside of Doom's head specifically. He even mentions this. He's like, what was taken from me, it goes far beyond the physical. Because back in Ultimate Invasion, if you guys remember, Howard Stark's time machine, it cut out a part of the Maker's mind. And due to that, certain capacities were lost. There are thoughts that he could never have. But as it pertains to Doom, because Doom is a Reed Richards, what the Maker might be missing, Doom is not missing. So using what he pulled from Doom, the Maker finds the Immortus engine. Deathlok tries to stop him, and the Maker kills her on the spot. Now the Maker takes the Immortus engine, and then what America Chavez sees here, she calls it out. She's like, my God, he's unfolding in 4 dimensions. And with that, what this is going to allow him to do now is to be able to escape the dome. And then just to throw salt in the wounds here, the Maker tells Doom, he's like, if you hadn't been here, who knows? They might have had a chance. Just like how you have a chance to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So what we do next here is that we jump back to Latveria. And we get this little quiet moment that's actually kind of nice here because we see May Storm and Aurora. They're standing right next to each other after taking care of some business. 2 Storms here, and May, she's completely geeking out, fangirling in this moment because she's like, this is the best moment of my life, and how she wishes that Armor was there to see it. Now, in this moment here, T'Challa, he gives the order. The warheads are ready and he's about to deploy them. As a matter of fact, he did deploy them. But the Ultimate X-Men, they still won't leave because they are looking for armor, Isako. So right now, they're at a crossroads because the countdown is happening. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then all of a sudden, nothing happens because here comes in these musical notes. And the reason why this happens here is because of the Guardians of the Galaxy. They appear. Now, as mentioned before here, America Chavez, this is who Doom was asking, hey, did you send that beacon? Did you send that signal out to him? Well, somehow they got here and we'll find out why. Now, these ultimate Guardians of the Galaxy here, they're from the far, far future. We see Captain Marvel here that pops up and she's like, do not panic. The primitive nuclear devices have been converted to music. No one will be harmed. Now, in one stroke, every soldier that the Maker infected gets sealed inside of a temporary pocket prison universe, and they're held there until they will be cured. Now, the one holding that containment cube here is Daredevil, because in this universe, Daredevil is the Beyonder, a near omnipotent cosmic being who took on the Daredevil identity. Powers, of course, include stepping between comic book panels and rewriting reality. And for this moment here, he's been recruited to be a part of the Guardians. So when T'Challa is asked the question like, who are these people? T'Challa's like, whoever they are, these Guardians just sterilized Latveria in under a minute. So the Guardians explain that they have come to keep a promise, how they crossed the millennia to be here for their friend, who of course they're talking about in America Chavez, and how she set off a beacon. But she right now, of course, as they know, is inside of the dome. Now, one of the Guardians mentions that, hey, I believe that we arrived a few minutes before the distress signal was sent. Listen, guys, time travel, like, I don't know. Listen, they came back far enough to arrive before the signal went out. That's how they got here before anyone knew to call them, right? Either way, what's happening right now is that the dome is coming down. And that is when we see the Maker. He comes out and he says, I will unmake the universe. Now, but before we can see the continuation of that here, we jump back to Boston. And this right here is where this issue gets brutal, man, because Captain Britain, Henry Duggery, decided to come to the battlefield himself, and he is right in front of Steve Rogers' face. Now, this fight has been going back and forth here throughout the issue, but I figured it was best to talk about it now. And Britain has been lecturing this entire time here, calling the Ultimates natives in their colorful costumes, talking about savagery, talking about civilization. This man has been insufferable. Now, Vision tries to warn Steve, here about Captain Britain, like, this dude ain't one to be messed with. And Steve is going in, man. He's throwing everything at this dude, and it ain't doing a damn thing. But then when Captain Britain, when he's striking, listen, them joints hurt. It's like watching Creed versus Drago, bro. Like, seriously. But of course, continually here, Britain is doing his dialogue, this lecture, this diatribe. He's like, you've actually heard us, Captain. I commend you on that. No one else has come close, but you've gotten careless and forgotten your betters. And he's like, Irish, aren't you? That's a defect of the Irish carelessness. To which Cap is like, I'm American and go to hell. But then Captain Britain here, he swings the sword of might and he comes wailing down here on Captain America's shield. And that thing, like, it cracks. And then to make matters worse, he continues to go in, chopping away, and then chops off Captain America's hand holding the shield. Like, this was one of the most shocking things that happened here in this particular issue. But wait, there's more, because as Cap, he's like, all right, a flesh wound, come on. You hate nations so much, you're wrapped in the Union Jack. To which Captain Britain is like, indeed, symbols, Captain. This costume, this army, these are symbols of my station, of total domination of my enemies. And while Quicksilver here and Hawkeye, they're getting yoked up, Captain Britain, he has this menacing look on his face. And as he drags the sword up one more time, you see Captain America just sitting there. He says, I have put Britain's myths in chains, but America's, I will simply kill. And he takes off Captain America's head like he did it. Like, it's gone. Like, I genuinely could not believe that Dennis Camp actually did this. It reminds me of the leak or deleted scene here where in the MCU Avengers Endgame, where Captain America's head was supposed to be thrown on the ground by Thanos. It's like he took inspiration from that and said, you know what, I'm gonna do it here in this series. So just like that, in the aftermath, Captain Britain is like, how fun. I love an unfair fight. But then simultaneously here, back in Latveria, this is when Iron Lad, Tony Stark, has to put out this distress signal. He's like, attention, all Ultimates. This is Iron Lad broadcasting from the city. The dome is down. I repeat, the city is open. The Maker has returned. All available Ultimates get to the city. The Maker is free, as we see them charging in to take on the Maker himself.
So we open up here at the end of time, and we're at the fortress of Kang, who is also Tony Stark, and we get this narration that kicks things off. It says, it's the death of a universe. Doesn't happen every day. Of course, I've been through this before. I know exactly how it's going to play out, beat for beat. So many lives, so much potential, wasted. Still, I watch. Again and again, I watch. Author and prisoner of events, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm always doing that. It's the end of this universe. All of this has already happened. So then we jump back here to the battlefield where we see the Maker, and you've got the Guardians of the Galaxy against him. You got the Ultimates, Black Panther, Killmonger, Storm, all of them coming at him. And the Maker's going off here on a diatribe. He's like, this world was a mistake. All of you were a mistake, but I will fix it, and I will fix the world. Now, Captain Marvel is calculating exactly what he's doing. She figures out that he's looking to expand outward through space and through time. She specifically uses a term that he's becoming a hyper object. And Iron Lad realizes that she's right, and with the Darwin bubble gone, time is back to its normal shape and its flow. So Tony tries to freeze time just to buy himself a moment to think, but then the Maker was way ahead of him, because the Maker gets his tentacles into him. And as Tony explains it here, it's like the Maker is reaching out, dripping down his personal timeline and strangling him from the womb. Or as he explains it, to destroy his great-great-grandmother, which is wild. In other words, he's trying to erase Tony from time. Now, what actually saves Tony in that moment is Daredevil, because in this universe here, Daredevil is the Beyonder, and he's got a cosmic hypercube, and he uses it here to cut the Maker's tentacles, and then to also trap him inside of this cube. Now, that containment here was only temporary, because as Daredevil is doing some fourth wall breaking, the cube shatters, and then the Maker, he pops back out, and then he knocks Daredevil back. Now, as you've been seeing before here through this Ultimate Endgame series, the Maker's been inside of Doom's head this entire arc. And he's telling Doom, he's like, you can drop the charade now, man. Like, we've won. And it's in that moment right there where Doom actually looks over at Tony and says, charade, Tony. To which Tony's like, not right now, Doom, but he doesn't get it yet. So then once again, man, the Maker is annoyed and then goes on this whole speech. He's like, no barrier can stop me. Nowhere is safe. I see the flaw in my design now. It's obvious. I believe that I could perfect something that was inherently imperfect. What a fool I was. All the universes, all the multiverses, they produce precisely one perfect life form, and that life form was me. So his plan here is to spread himself across the planet, across the universe, across past and future, to usher in a new eternity of perfection from the beginning of time to the very end. The universe is one perfect life form that is constant, immune to change through and outside of time. And he starts doing exactly that. We see him expanding now to Winston County, Alabama, where Luke Cage is. We see him over to Detroit. We see over to where MJ and JJJ and Uncle Ben are, and MJ's asking the obvious question. If the Maker has escaped, then what has happened to Peter, her husband? What has happened to Spider-Man? We also see him expand into Gamma Island, where She-Hulk, Giant Man, and the Wasp are. Then we cut over to the Eastern Ultimates front, where Captain Britain was, and that's where we see where Pietro and Wanda are standing over the dead body here of Captain America. Now, Pietro is telling Wanda, like, yo, you gotta save him. But Wanda's like, I can't, because his soul is not here. He's gone. And that grief right there, it turns into rage real fast, because Wanda's like, who did this? And now back on the main battlefield here, the Maker is now steamrolling everything. I mean, the Fantastic Four is up against him, like he's taking them out. And he's just saying over and over and over again, I unmake you. I unmake you, just erasing people, or at least trying to erase people from existence. And then Captain Marvel is freaking out here because this is exactly what she saw coming. When they first came to this universe, she told him that she saw in the histories how the future gets lost. And some details, although they might be different, this is essentially it. This is how they lose. Now Tony's like, nah man, we ain't going out like that. And as the Maker is continuing on talking about how he will unmake them, he continues on by saying, I am one unbreakable whole, one mind controlling all. And as he sees it, everyone fighting him is fractured. They're divided. It's chaotic. They're fighting a million tiny battles when only one battle matters. And it's in this moment here where we finally see Ultimate Wolverine jump onto the scene, and he comes in here with Jean, the Phoenix. And it looks like we got the rest of the team showing up here too, the Wasp, She-Hulk, all of them, which we can only assume here was orchestrated by Tony. And as they're going at it, Phoenix is saying that the Maker, like for some reason he won't burn, that something is wrong with his mind, it's wrong. Now Wolverine at the same time here is getting torn apart by the Maker's carnage body, and he's stripped down here to nothing but essentially, or almost nothing here, because we start to see his adamantium skeleton. They're throwing everything at this dude right now and it barely matters. Now, the Maker keeps taunting Doom throughout all of this, going on about how heroes are all the same, full of confidence, about how he created this reality as a refuge, a world without heroes, without gaudy costumes and catchphrases, and childish morality, and how the Ultimates, they ruined it. And then Doom comes right back at him. It's like, this world, man, is only a mirror of its creator. It's hideous, it's inhuman, and it's broken. And then the Maker gets personal, man. He tells Doom that he can sense the excitement that Doom tries to hide, that deep down that Doom doesn't even want to be alive anymore. And then the Maker just absolutely, it looks like he vaporizes Doom completely. And you can see the terror and shock here on Tony's face. And then we take this moment here to where we come back to Wanda and Pietro, who's now met up with Hawkeye. And now they've tracked down Captain Britain, or at least they've gotten close to him, because Wanda knows that he was the one that killed Captain America. And his men, they're warning him. They're like, yo, she coming for you, fam. And Britain sees her power and is like, man, it's astounding. To which her guy tells her that, like, yo, she channels a primordial power, one of the elder gods, or one from the elder gods. And Captain Britain is like, yeah, that's impossible. The great old ones, they don't take students. He doesn't know that that power came from within there, but you know what? He'll find out. So he's like, either way, man, let's get prepared. Call the Black Crusade, call all the Merlins, and then bring me Excalibur. But now when we get back on the field, man, we find out that Doom did not in fact die. Because now we see what Doom, or what secret Doom has been carrying this entire arc. Because you see, in that lab, he was using the Cosmic Ray Machine, and he was using it here in short control bursts, and that gave him powers, essentially the whole Fantastic Four set. So to a certain extent, he was able to recreate the team that he lost, the family that he lost. And I mean, man, the Maker is pissed. So the berating here, it just continues, right? He's like, cosmically powered or not, you're nothing, Doom. You're pathetic. You think about offing yourself 100 times a day. I know, because I'm here in your mind. But this is where Doom starts fighting back. And I want to make sure that this lands correctly here, because what's happening is in Doom's head, the Maker exists in his brain. The silhouettes of the Fantastic Four team, they start being conjured up here from his own mind. And in this plane of his mind, we see here where the Thing punches the Maker right in the dome. And as he does this here, he says back to the Maker, he's like, you're right. Once I did want to off myself, but I realized something, that there in that cosmic ray chamber, I carry them with me. My friends, my family, I'm the only one who, if I die, then they die. So therefore, I cannot die. I have to live for them. So what he does here is that he finally burns the Maker out of his head. He punches him out of his head. And as he points over here to the real Maker out there on the battlefield, he tells the Maker, he's like, this world must live, which means that you have to die. And then he tells Tony, make me a path. Just like how you should take that path here to the subscribe button and press it if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. And there's this moment here which I kind of find to be funny, because Tony comes to Doom and is like, yo, who are you talking to? Because remember, as I said now, like that little fight that Doom had here with the Maker was all in his head. But Doom's like, man, we ain't got time for that. Because it all comes down to this moment right here. You and me and the Immortus engine. 4 dimensions. Remember? And then Tony gives him his respect. He's like, listen, man, you were always better at math than I was. To which Doom then says, exactly. So then what Tony does here is that he divides himself into hundreds. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's thousands of himself in a way to try to keep the Maker from spreading too far out into the past and the future. But the thing is, even with everyone there, it's not enough. It's not even close to enough. But still, he broadcasts to everybody now. He tells them, this is Iron calling all Ultimates. We only have minutes before the Maker replaces all life in this universe with himself. We need everyone now. Every person who can hear this, every person on the planet and beyond, strike as one, all of us together. And as Tony's narration continues, it lets us know that the Immortus engine renders space and time meaningless. It is the ultimate connection, the struggle. With all of its many independent moving parts, it comes into alignment. And for a brief, beautiful moment, all struggle is one struggle. It's all one fight. And Unmake is essentially in full rage mode right now because he's like, this fight is over. The universe is over. Your creator has judged you unworthy of existence. And he points to the Guardians from the future as proof that they already saw this, that the future is set. So Tony's rebuttal is, nah, that's why you actually chose this universe. That's what makes it special. In most realities, when you change the past, you create a new timeline, a new branch. But this timeline, when you change the past, you also change the future. And the Guardians are proof. And so are all of them. Because how else could Doom have saved them from the Hulk earlier? Because in the deepest, truest sense, we can change the future. So he then tells Doom, he's like, so change it, Doom. Now the narration shifts here because it's clear that Tony is essentially speaking here in past tense because he said that they could only piece it together later because what it came down to was a battle of wills. Because as we see here, Doom going closer and closer to the Immortus engine, Tony says for the control of the engine and everything that it meant, two men named Reed Richards and one named Doom fighting for control of the universe. One Reed's mind forged like a blade by a lifetime of tragedy and torture. And it's in this moment here where we see this explosion that then says, Doom! As Tony's narration continues, as he speaks about the other Reed, about a villain's origin story that was getting dumped by his girlfriend. Hey man, some breakups are hard to get over, you know? Now, we do also take a brief second here to see Wanda go to work because she does catch up here with Captain Britain. And then she turns Excalibur against him as he drives it here into his neck, which that poison is essentially going to instantly kill him. Now, this win that they got here, the team, it came with the price because Doom mentions that he had one choice, one thing that he could change, one thing that he could save. And what we see here in Doom's mind are his last moments. We see these silhouettes again here of the Fantastic Four, his friends, his family, the ones who exist only in his mind at this point, or we should say in his heart. Sue comes to him, he drops his helmet. We see here where his face is intact, not reconstructed like how the Maker had done, and that's when they embrace. And then Tony says on the field, he's like, he's gone. But in a sense, it's not fully with sadness. More like with some awe here. But also, guys, the Maker was gone too, at least for a while. Now, the very last move here that Doom was able to do, the one thing that he actually saved, because we see him here pop up, is Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And Tony just rushes over to him and is like, Spider-Man, you're alive. To which Spider-Man's like, yeah, last time I checked, like, bruh, I guess you clearly didn't know that you just were vaporized here by the Maker Carnage. But I guess it's best that he probably didn't know how gruesomely he did just die not too long ago. So everyone goes in for hugs and the celebration, and now the war is over. But that's what we get here to see that the story was actually being told, as I mentioned before, in past tense by Tony Stark Iron Lad. And he was talking here to his future self, Kang. And as we see Kang fading away here, Iron Lad says, I came here to explain it to you and to watch. The future is not set. Anything is possible. The end is unwritten. We will write it ourselves. So then this shifts us back here to the Ultimate Universe finale. And what this does here is it shows us where things go after the Maker. So we open here on a school where we see MJ currently in a meeting waiting on Peter to show up. Now Peter is currently out here doing friendly neighborhood Spider-Man stuff. He's taking down some villain that's throwing energy rings, which I believe here is the Ringer. But Peter does show up here 20 minutes later on. And as Peter walks into this meeting here, the teacher mentions that there's something going on with young May's attendance, or as she would say, lack thereof, because she's been skipping classes at least 3 days in the last week. And on the days that she does show up, she disappears here for hours at a time. So Peter and MJ are like, what? To which she's like, well, she was here. Did you lose her? To which the teacher is like, no. But now that I'm sitting here before y'all, I'm starting to think that the problem is at home, and more specifically with the two of you. So after the meeting, man, I mean, MJ is livid. Peter goes on to talk about how you can't call a teacher that, to which MJ is like, I wanted to call her something worse. So when they get home, man, MJ starts yelling immediately. She's like, May, get your behind here now. They walk in, they find Richard still, well, he's still with Felicia Hardy, but Felicia Hardy right now is away in Europe. So he's been, occupying his time here with playing some video games. Man is barely functioning. It looked like he hasn't slept in days. He tells them that he doesn't know where Mary is. And as they're going on and talking, we see this sound that goes wham. And when they look who crashes here into the window. It is young May Parker wearing the Pico suit. So now we know. Then we shift here over to Ultimate Black Panther. And T'Challa is right now here with Aurora Monroe, Storm. Now, if you were following the Ultimate Black Panther series here, you know what's going on with him. He has a dark vibranium in his blood and is trying to kill him at a cellular level. So he's been scanning his DNA once a week. And his hypothesis here is that he can't remove it, but he should be able to keep it dormant. So Storm wants to know, like, why did you bring me here? Because I'm not a scientist. And he says because he needs her help. He explains his thinking about death and what he actually fears, which is not actually death itself. It's what happens to Wakanda, what happens to Africa when death wraps his hands around him. So Storm's like, once again, why am I here? But before he gets into it, he asks her a question. He's like, what is in this land that gives you hope? And that's when she mentions that there's a school in Africa that's currently thriving, that Shuri is currently teaching there right now. Which, if you've once again been following the Ultimate Black Panther series, Shuri essentially is supposed to be in prison right now for the things that she did, but she commends T'Challa for actually sending her on this redemption arc and having her, teach there. But that's Storm's hope, that ultimately that the kids, the children, won't end up like how she did. They'll be on a better path. They won't have to endure what she had to endure. So T'Challa takes that in, but then does say this. He's like, it wasn't wisdom that placed Shuri there. It was actually my love. So back to the theory that he has, is that the dark vibranium has a consciousness, some kind of hive consciousness in the cellular structure. Did I say cellular? Cellular structure. My bad. He knows that he can't remove it from his system, but if it has a consciousness, and it also has a capacity here for fear. So that's why he needs Storm. So he takes her here out to the plains. He specifically wanted to do this away from the kingdom because it might kill him. And as they're walking down this ramp here, we see them holding hands. Because now in the Ultimate Black Panther series, T'Challa and Storm, they got their own lives. T'Challa is married to Okoye, and Killmonger and Storm were together. But these two did have a fling that did involve them having a child, so... And I'm talking about Black Panther and Aurora. So it's clear that they still have feelings for each other here, because this scene definitely doesn't hide that. And T'Challa says it's a difficult thing being with her and talking about what it is that he wants, to which Storm says, well, okay, what do you want? To which he says, let's do this in the sky. So they fly up together. And as she confirms that T'Challa, this is actually what he wants to do, he says, yeah, and do not be gentle. So they lean in and they kiss. And then we see the sparks fly. Now, I'm not talking about like the one between them, the chemistry. I'm talking about the actual lightning from Storm here. Of course I am. Of course I am, guys. And as they lay back on the ground here, T'Challa's like, I feel renewed and I feel ready. So which Storm's like, ready for what? That's what he says, to give these lands more hope. Now, as we transition here to Ultimate X-Men, now for full disclosure here, I haven't really been following the Ultimate X-Men series, so I may not be able to give you as much context on this one, but there is a Mutant Registration Act that, based on the events that happened here, has basically been postponed. But in the meantime here, the Mutant Restraint Force, the MRF, they've still been trying to crack down here on mutants. And there's these guns that have these nets that when they hit the mutants, they dampen their powers. And we see these neighborhood meeting scenes here where like regular people are getting trained on how to use this equipment. And then we transition here to this other location where we see this girl as she manifests her powers here in a park. And it looks like she accidentally wrapped her tentacles here around her mother. So Mr. Sasaki, her father, he tries to fire up this net. But then here comes one of the X-Men that comes in to stop him. And as the reinforcements try to come on in, we see the entire X-Men team, or we see some of them, in aid here to free this girl. And when the dust settles here, someone from the Secret Society X-Men comes to Michan, that's this girl's name, and says, "We know someone who helps people like us. You want to come with?" And that's when she says, "Uh-huh," as in yes. Then we check in here on Ultimate Sabretooth. It's good to see him because we haven't seen him throughout the entire, Endgame fight here. And as we know, he's been, if you've been following the Ultimate Wolverine series, he's got Leech and Art. He's essentially playing dad here. And he's out in the wilderness out at this location in the Eurasian Republic, just vibing. But then they spot this Sentinel that's up in the sky. So then Sabretooth switches modes here, tells the kids to get somewhere safe and remember what we practice. But as the Sentinel pops down, as we know already, it's not a hostile. Because in this universe, Set 1 is Legion. That's what he became here. That's the simplified version, there's more to it, but we'll leave it at that for now. And inside with them was Logan and Phoenix. Now this is the first time here that Jean Grey is meeting Ultimate Sabretooth. So here Logan and Ultimate Sabretooth, they get to reunite here. It's actually Logan's birthday, so they agree here to kind of chill out for a little while, for a few months. As Phoenix and Set 1, they hop on up out of there. And now we get to the big moment here because we see Tony Stark in his armor floating above Earth's atmosphere, broadcasting here to the world. And he's like, "Dear world, this is Tony Stark, and I want to ask, how are you guys feeling? We've all been through something long and difficult together. While I know that many are proud of what we've accomplished, I know that there's some people who are confused, sad, or angry. And I wanted you to know that I understand, and I'm here for you, and I will always be here for you." We see him moving through different moments across the world as he speaks, helping Luke Cage handle a crew that finally surrenders. We see where they're working on fixing up and rebuilding here Detroit with Vision, Jim Hammond. We see where they're building a Stark Tower Tragedy Memorial Community Center. We see where there continue the uprisings. We see where Gamma Island is now being decontaminated here and rebuilt. Hawkeye is fighting a group of people who have rebranded themselves here, the Red Skulls, in Captain America's name, but Hawkeye knows the truth, so he's fighting that rebellion, saying that Steve would have hated what they've become. We see where Sunfire is still on his throne, but no, not as powered up as he was before. We see Emma Frost, she's now stepped into power herself and claims to do things differently, or that she will do things differently. Then we see Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. They're finally in couples counseling, doing their best Mr. and Mrs. Smith interpretation because they can't really actually talk about what they do to the counselor. But then the most interesting thing here is out in Latveria because we see the Fantastic Force, the team that Doom built, and they're cleaning things up. And there's a mention here that there's still some molecules left, which I assume they're talking about here of the Maker. We also do see where America Chavez goes back with the Guardians of the Galaxy and says her goodbyes here to Tony. And Tony wraps us up by saying the goal of the experiment is that what Tony calls it is an experiment, in fact, is to reinvent themselves, all of them together, all of them individually, and he looks at the infinite horizons, endless possibility, success, failure, and everything in between, and about how it's all up to them. It's beautiful and frightening. Anything can happen. There is so much to say and so much work to do, so he'll cut it short. Thank you all for listening and for joining us, because this is not the end. And as Tony says that last bit, man, we cut to someone here in Latveria who picks up a leftover symbiote residue. And as we see them running up the stairs here, we see them saying in Latverian, "Of course, when I read the files, I was shocked, but finally it made sense. Why I've been hiding all my life, the constant assassination attempts." And then we see the figure here with the green hood, that suit on that we know, the chain clasp, and he holds the vial with the symbiote inside and says, "Now let's see what we can learn from you, Maker, or should I call you Richards?" Bruh, is this Victor Von Doom of the Ultimate Universe? The most exciting thing to me here is that on the very last page, we see something that says the Ultimate Universe will return. That is the most exciting aspect of this to me here, because up until this point, we thought this thing was going to be over. But I'm excited to see that this will come back. I'm hoping that they're true to their word. What did you think? Leave it down below in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like here on this video for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you're brand new to the channel. And as always, thanks so much for kicking it with Keepin' It Comic. Bye!